The Roman Empire had seen its share of tyrants, despots, and monsters, but few rulers ever embodied madness, arrogance, and theatrical cruelty as completely as Commodus. To his subjects, he was the emperor who abandoned dignity for spectacle, who debased the empire in blood-soaked games, and who crowned himself a living god. To history, he remains the ruler whose death, strangled in his bath by his own servants, marked not just the end of his reign, but the beginning of Rome's long spiral toward collapse. But Commodus was not born to be remembered as a madman. He was the son of Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher-king, the wise emperor whose reign was immortalized as the high point of Roman virtue. That such a father could produce such a son was, in itself, a tragedy of empire. For in Commodus we see the story not just of one man's descent into delusion, but of a civilization cracking under the weight of its own contradictions. The heir of a philosopher, from promise to madness. Commodus was born in 161 CE, twin to a brother who died young, and the beloved child of Marcus Aurelius and his wife Faustina. Unlike many emperors, he was not an adopted heir chosen for merit, but a natural son, the first in generations to inherit the purple by blood rather than adoption. This fact alone set the stage for disaster. For Rome's greatest emperors, Trajan, Hadrian, Antoninus Pius, and Marcus Aurelius, had been chosen for their abilities, not their lineage. Commodus was different. He was emperor not because of who he was, but because of who his father had been. As a boy, he showed signs of arrogance. Ancient sources record that at the age of 12, he once ordered a servant to be cast into the furnace for drawing a bath too cold. His tutors restrained the punishment, but the incident revealed the cruel streak that would later define his reign. He was raised in the shadow of Marcus Aurelius's campaigns along the Danube, where the philosopher-emperor sought to preserve the empire against Germanic invasions. Commodus accompanied his father to the front, but while Marcus endured the hardships of military life, his son longed for comfort, luxury, and adoration. When Marcus died in 180 CE, the legions proclaimed Commodus emperor at the age of 19. At first, the empire rejoiced. Here was a handsome, youthful heir, the natural-born son of Rome's most beloved ruler. Optimism filled the air, but the facade soon crumbled. Where Marcus had valued duty, Commodus valued pleasure. Where Marcus had pursued philosophy, Commodus pursued spectacle. Almost immediately, Commodus abandoned his father's military campaigns. The Danubian wars, so carefully managed by Marcus, were brought to a hasty conclusion. Commodus signed a peace that many considered dishonorable, paying off barbarian tribes rather than defeating them. For the senators of Rome, this was the first sign that the philosopher's son lacked both discipline and vision. Back in Rome, Commodus reveled in his new status. He distanced himself from Marcus's circle of advisors and surrounded himself with flatterers, freedmen, and sycophants. To the Senate, this was a betrayal. To Commodus, it was freedom. He was emperor, and he would rule not with wisdom, but with whim. It was in the arena that Commodus revealed the full extent of his madness. Unlike past emperors who presided over the games as dignified spectators, Commodus insisted on stepping into the arena himself. He styled himself as a new Hercules, the demigod reborn in flesh. Draped in lion skins, wielding a club, he would descend into the Colosseum and slaughter animals brought from across the empire. Lions, elephants, ostriches, even giraffes, all fell beneath his sword or spear. He delighted in killing, not as a soldier on campaign, but as a performer on stage. At first, the people were thrilled. To see their emperor in the arena was both shocking and exhilarating, but soon whispers spread of the corruption of Rome's dignity. The Senate, in particular, was outraged. An emperor was supposed to embody Roman gravitas, the solemn majesty of power. Commodus had reduced the purple to a costume, the empire to a circus, yet the emperor pressed on. He forced the Senate to hail him as Hercules reborn. Statues were erected depicting him as the demigod, club in hand, lion skin draped across his shoulders. He renamed the months of the year after his own titles, demanded worship as a living god, and declared that Rome itself would be renamed Colonia Commodiana, the colony of Commodus. This was more than vanity. It was megalomania. Commodus was not content to rule as emperor, he demanded divinity. As his delusions grew, so too did his paranoia. Commodus trusted no one but his favorites, and even they lived in fear of his sudden rages. He executed senators on whim, confiscated estates, and filled his coffers with their wealth. The philosopher-emperor's legacy of reason had given way to terror. His cruelty became legendary. It is said he once had a man killed simply for being better looking than himself. He delighted in humiliating nobles, forcing them to watch him in the arena, mocking their discomfort as he dressed like a gladiator. Gladiators themselves, once admired for their skill, were forced to lose to him, for no man dared raise a weapon against the emperor. Commodus's victories were hollow, staged for spectacle, yet he treated them as divine proof of his greatness. To the common people, this was entertainment. To the Senate, it was degradation. To history, it was madness. By the early 190s CE, Commodus's behavior had alienated nearly every class in Rome. The Senate despised him, the nobility feared him, the army distrusted his indifference to campaigns. Only the plebs of Rome, entertained by his lavish games and handouts, still adored him. His rule became a balancing act. Buy the loyalty of the masses, terrify the elite, and trust no one. But paranoia is a dangerous foundation for power. Assassination attempts multiplied. Plots were uncovered, conspiracies whispered. Commodus responded with executions, purges, and spectacles of cruelty. Each act of violence bought him temporary safety, but eroded his legitimacy further. By 192 CE, the empire was on edge. And in Commodus's delusion, he planned to seal his godhood with one final gesture. He would appear in the arena on New Year's Day, not as emperor, but as a gladiator, to refound Rome in his own image. The empire would begin anew, not as Rome, but as Commodiana. The stage was set not for triumph, but for his destruction. For those closest to him had decided that his reign could not continue, and it would end not with the roar of the Colosseum, but with the quiet gurgle of water in a palace bath. The final days, plots, betrayal, and the bathhouse murder. By the year 192 CE, the reign of Commodus had become unbearable, even to those who had once profited from his rule. The emperor had long abandoned any pretense of statesmanship, preferring instead the blood-soaked sand of the Colosseum, the adulation of the mob, and the delusions of his self-declared divinity. But beneath the spectacle, the empire itself was cracking. The Senate was humiliated, the nobility terrorized, the army neglected, and the economy strained by Commodus's extravagant games. What kept him on the throne was not respect, but fear, and even fear by then had begun to falter. In his final months, Commodus's insanity reached new heights. He demanded that Rome itself be renamed Colonia Commodiana, and declared that the people were to be called Commodiani. The Senate, reduced to little more than an audience for his megalomania, had no choice but to comply. He paraded through the city dressed as Hercules, lion skin draped over his shoulders, club in hand, statues erected to glorify his divinity. But the most shocking announcement came in December 1922. Commodus declared that on the coming New Year's Day, he would enter the arena not as emperor, but as a gladiator to preside over the refounding of Rome. This was no symbolic gesture. He intended to erase the old city and rebuild it in his own name. The empire itself, he proclaimed, would be reborn as his personal colony. To the mob, entertained by free bread and endless bloodshed, this sounded like more spectacle. To the Senate and the Praetorian Guard, it was sacrilege. an annihilation of everything Rome stood for. They saw not a god, but a tyrant whose madness would destroy the empire itself. Plots against Commodus were nothing new. Assassinations had been attempted before, but each time he had survived, shielded by luck and paranoia. Yet, in late December, a conspiracy formed within the very walls of his palace. The conspirators were not shadowy rebels or distant senators. They were those closest to him, his mistress, his chamberlain, and his praetorian prefect. His mistress, Marcia, had once enjoyed his favor and influence, but even she had tired of his cruelty and unpredictability. She discovered her own name on a secret list of those he intended to execute, a list Commodus had drawn up for the new year when he planned to rid himself of those he no longer trusted. Alongside her name were others, including that of Latus, the prefect of the Praetorian Guard, and Eclectus, the chamberlain of the palace. In that moment, the three realized that their survival depended on Commodus's death. The plan was swift. On the night of December the 31st, they would kill the emperor before he could kill them. That evening, Commodus prepared for the New Year festivities with his usual indulgence. He bathed, feasted, and drank deeply, imagining the triumph that awaited him in the Colosseum the next day. But as he drank, Marcia slipped poison into his wine. He gulped it down without suspicion, and soon the effects began to show. His stomach churned, his body weakened, his senses dulled. For a brief moment, it seemed the plot had succeeded. But Commodus was young and strong, and the poison did not kill him quickly enough. Realizing what had happened, he convulsed and vomited, forcing the deadly drink from his body. His assassins panicked. The poison had failed. The emperor was weakened, but alive. If he recovered, their names would be the first to meet the executioner's axe. There could be no hesitation. He had to die that night. Dragged from his feast to the baths, Commodus staggered, half-conscious, weakened by the poison. He sank into the warm water of the tub, perhaps believing it might soothe his sickness. Instead, it became his grave. A wrestler named Narcissus, once employed as his sparring partner, was summoned. The irony was grim. Commodus, who fancied himself a gladiator, would die at the hands of an athlete trained to obey. Narcissus entered the steamy chamber, seized the emperor, and forced him under the water. Commodus thrashed weakly, his strength already drained. He clawed, gasped, fought, but the wrestler's grip was merciless. Slowly, the emperor's struggles ceased. The bubbles rose, then stopped. Rome's self-proclaimed Hercules, god and gladiator, was dead, strangled like a common criminal in the very place he sought comfort. Silence followed. The conspirators stared at the lifeless body. The mad emperor, who had renamed Rome after himself, who had slaughtered beasts in the Colosseum, who had declared himself divine, now floated dead in a bath, strangled by his own servant. His corpse was hurriedly wrapped and hidden. To announce his death too suddenly would risk chaos, for no emperor's fall was ever simple in Rome. But word spread quickly nonetheless. By dawn of the new year, the city knew. The people who had cheered his gladiatorial games mourned, while the Senate rejoiced. For them, Commodus's death was not tragedy, but deliverance. His statues were torn down, his titles revoked, his memory cursed. The Senate declared him an enemy of Rome, and his reign was damned as a stain on the empire. His name was stricken from inscriptions, his divine pretensions erased. Rome would not be Colonia Commodiana after all, yet the legacy of his death endured. It was a reminder of the fragility of emperors, of the treachery lurking in palace walls, of how swiftly divinity could collapse into mortality. Commodus had thought himself a god, but in the end, he drowned like any man. The aftermath of Commodus's death, Rome in chaos, the year of the 5 emperors, and the collapse of stability. The body of Commodus had scarcely grown cold in the palace baths before Rome itself was thrust into uncertainty. The conspirators who had orchestrated his death, Marcia, Latus, and Eclectus, had achieved their desperate goal. The emperor who had planned their executions was dead, but in killing Commodus, they had also opened a void. For the Roman Empire could never remain leaderless for long. Power abhors a vacuum, and in the corridors of the Palatine that night, power was already being reshaped. When news of Commodus's death reached the Senate, the reaction was one of relief, even jubilation. For years, senators had endured his humiliations, forced to watch him in the arena, compelled to worship him as a god, stripped of dignity while their estates were confiscated. Now, at last, the tyrant was gone. They wasted no time in damning his memory, a practice Rome knew well. His titles were revoked, his name was scratched from inscriptions, his statues were toppled. The man who had renamed Rome Colonia Commodiana was declared an enemy of the state. The Senate's message was clear. Commodus would not be remembered as a god or a hero, but as a mad tyrant whose reign had been a disgrace to the empire. It was an attempt not only to erase him, but to cleanse themselves of complicity in his rule. But erasure was not enough. Rome needed a new emperor. The conspirators and the Senate quickly settled on Publius Helvius Pertinax, the urban prefect of the city and a respected senator. Pertinax was known as a man of discipline and integrity, a veteran of the army, and above all, someone who could restore dignity to the empire. He was proclaimed emperor on the first day of January 193 CE. For a brief moment, it seemed as if Rome might emerge from Commodus's madness into stability. Pertinax promised reform, a return to sanity after the circus of Commodus's reign. But the shadow of the gladiator emperor was not so easily erased. For while the Senate rejoiced, the Roman mob reacted differently. To the people, Commodus had been a benefactor. He had lavished them with games, spectacles, and handouts. He had descended into the arena himself, entertaining them with blood and theatrics. They did not see the tyrant who mocked the Senate. They saw the showman who had filled their days with bread and spectacle. When they heard of his death, riots broke out. Crowds shouted his name, demanded his deification, resisted the Senate's condemnation. For them, Commodus had been one of their own, vulgar, excessive, indulgent, but theirs. The very traits that horrified the elite had endeared him to the masses. This split between the Senate's hatred and the mob's adoration revealed the fractured state of Rome. Commodus, even in death, continued to divide the empire he had ruled so disastrously. The Praetorian Guard, Rome's supposed protectors, had been complicit in Commodus's fall. Their prefect, Latus, had joined the conspiracy, ensuring the emperor's strangling went unchallenged. But the Guard's loyalty was not to the Senate or even to Rome. It was to money, power, and whoever could buy their allegiance. Pertinax, the new emperor, discovered this truth within weeks. Attempting to impose discipline on the corrupt Praetorians, he cut their lavish pay and demanded obedience. The Guard, accustomed to indulgence under Commodus, mutinied. On March 28, 1930 CE, scarcely 3 months into his reign, Pertinax was murdered in the palace courtyard, hacked down by the very soldiers sworn to protect him. With Pertinax's blood staining the marble, Rome plunged into chaos. In one of the most disgraceful episodes in Roman history, the Praetorian Guard decided to sell the throne to the highest bidder, literally. From the walls of their camp, they announced that the empire was up for auction. Wealthy senators scrambled, and the prize went to Didius Julianus, who promised each soldier a vast donative, 25,000 sesterces per man. Julianus was proclaimed emperor not by merit, not by blood, not even by military conquest, but by bribery. To the Senate and the people, this was humiliation beyond words. The empire that had once crowned Augustus and Trajan was now sold like a slave in the market. The memory of Commodus loomed larger than ever. His reign of madness had ended in strangulation, but in death, he had left behind not stability, but rot. Julianus's bought throne lasted only weeks. Across the provinces, powerful generals proclaimed themselves emperors. Septimius Severus in Pannonia, Pescennius Niger in Syria, and Clodius Albinus in Britain. Each saw Commodus's death as an opportunity to seize power. Civil war erupted and Rome plunged into the bloody year of the 5 emperors. Julianus was abandoned, executed in June, and Severus marched into Rome as master. But the chaos Commodus had unleashed had set the tone for decades. The stability of the Antonine Age, the golden age of Marcus Aurelius and his predecessors, was shattered. In its place came civil war, military coups, and the long decline of Rome's unity. The Senate's condemnation of Commodus could not erase the memory of his reign. Statues could be toppled, inscriptions defaced, but the scars remained. The empire had seen an emperor abandon dignity for spectacle, abandon governance for blood, abandon reality itself for delusion. And though he was dead, his legacy lived on in the instability that followed. In the gladiator emperor, Rome had glimpsed both the corruption of its ideals and the danger of unchecked power.